Всем привет! It's time for a new breed of armored vehicle around here. I'm proud to present it with veteran and historian James Warford. Today's video is going to cover the SU-122-54. As always, the historical references are listed at the end of the video as well as down in the description below. Пошли! First things first, let's explain the whole Soviet SU naming convention. I could probably do a whole video on this alone, but I'll try to make it short. During World War II and the Cold War, the West's failure to appreciate the shock armor importance of the Soviet SUs apparently comes around from the poor handling of terminology. The Soviets called their assault guns самоходные установки. Translated directly, this is something like self-propelled mounts. Abbreviated to SU, it's pronounced like SU. Assault guns using the chassis of the Joseph Stalin heavy tank are called ISU, pronounced like ISU. Unfortunately, the whole genre frequently receives SU or SU as a generic term, and sometimes SAU, the A standing for artillery. This general use of the SU designation has resulted in Westerners confused about the role, and thus the vital importance that they had during World War II and the Cold War in the Soviet Army. The confusion was driven by the practice of just taking the Soviet terms and translating them literally. So you see that in the common use of self-propelled gun when referring to a Soviet SU. Unfortunately, the mass of Western militaries appeared to automatically think of self-propelled guns as field artillery. They didn't evaluate or consider the Soviet SUs as what they truly were, assault guns, more properly classed as tanks. With the doctrine they were designed for in mind, the Soviet SUs were similar to the US Army's T-28 super heavy tank, if you've seen that around on my channel. It's not what they look like, it's about what they were built for. Interestingly enough, the Soviet SUs, like the SU-122 and SU-122S, were also very capable tank destroyers. This is a significant capability that evolved into the first truly combined assault gun and tank destroyer, the SU-122-54, after the war. The history of the SU-122-54 is interesting for a variety of reasons. We'll start out when work began at Omsk Tank Plant 174 in 1949. Known by the designation Object 600 during its development, this design was focused on using more than a few components from the T-54 tank. The first prototype was built in 1950, with factory testing in 1951. 3 prototypes completed military trials in 1953 with the Soviet Army. In spite of some initial problems with minor design flaws and poor workmanship, and after some necessary changes were made, the SU-122-54 was adopted in March 1954. In 1955, 4 of the 36-ton SU-122-54s were delivered to the Soviet Army. This new vehicle was fitted with very impressive firepower, mounting the D-49 122mm rifled main gun, which was a version of the D-25TA main gun, unique to the SU-122-54. It was also armed with 2 KPVT 14.5mm heavy machine guns. One of these is mounted coaxially, and one is at the loader's position for air defense. It was also fitted with the rarely seen TKD-09 stereoscopic rangefinder at the commander's position. This rangefinder was adjustable from 4 to 10x and worked from 500 meters out to the 5-kilometer range. The vehicle was manned by a 5-man crew: commander, gunner, driver, and 2 loaders positioned on either side of the main gun. According to now unclassified CIA reporting from 1962, which was based on classified Soviet documents, a key purpose of Soviet assault guns is the qualitative reinforcement of medium tanks. According to these Soviet documents, assault guns created on the chassis of the medium tank and differing from it by having more powerful armament along with Soviet heavy tanks are the most powerful weapon for combating the tanks of the enemy. So, to demonstrate by comparison, while the T-10M had a slightly more powerful main gun with its M62T, both vehicles also carried those 2 14.5mm heavy machine guns, the combination of 2 loaders, and so a higher rate of fire, as well as that TKD-09 stereoscopic rangefinder, lent to it more accurate fire over long range. This gave the firepower advantage to the SU-122-54. The SU-122-54 had the same 100mm thick glasses armor as the T-54. Here, you can see the T-54's glasses armor cut away to show both the actual thickness and the effective thickness. 100mm angled at 60 degrees provides 200mm of effective thickness. Although using the same 100mm plate, the SU-122-54's glasses armor provided less effective thickness because it was angled at 51 degrees, providing 159mm of effective thickness. The lower hull provided 80mm of armor, hull corners and upper hull sides were also 80mm, and the lower hull sides were 60mm. For the running gear, 5 road wheels on each side, with a drive sprocket at the rear, and for suspension, individual torsion bars and hydraulic shock absorbers were provided at the first and fifth road wheels. Powered by a B-54 520 horsepower 12-cylinder 4-stroke V-shaped engine, it had a maximum speed of 48 km an hour and an operating range of 400 km. Something unique to the SU-122-54 are the vehicle size indicators. These are different from the regular undirected light size indicators typical for Soviet tanks. Here, each spring-mounted mast is topped by a red light that's faced away from the driver. When operating at night, the SU-122-54's vehicle size indicators projected a red beam of light that the driver would see on an obstacle in front of the vehicle. If there weren't any obstacles, the driver didn't see the light since it was facing away from him. It would seem that the decision to put the driver high and to the far right of the hull at the same level with the tank commander, as opposed to low in the hull and centered or off to the left, caused a need to provide the driver with an additional driving aid. The two vehicle size indicators, the easier to see short masts on the right and the taller masts on the left, help the driver maneuver the vehicle through confined spaces. From the opinion of Mr. Warford, that would mean while driving and fighting on city streets as opposed to wide open spaces. Maybe a lesson learned from fighting the Germans in cities during World War II. The SU-122-54 was only in production from 1955 to 1957. This short run provided a total of only 77 vehicles to the Soviet Army. Interestingly enough, that total was exactly 1/10 of the number of German Kanonen Jagdpanzer tank destroyers produced from 1965 to 1967, which was exactly 770. But the small production count shouldn't be viewed as an indicator of performance limitations or problems that they had with the SU-122-54. In fact, large-scale production was planned and approved for the new assault gun, and a number of upgrades were planned, including changing to the more powerful M62T2 122mm main gun, and adding infrared night vision equipment too. The timing of its arrival was actually the main problem. The pro-missile and anti-gun preferences voiced loudly by the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev in those days, included even challenging the military value of tanks in general, is what forced the production of the SU-122-54 to stop. It wasn't until several years after its production had ended that information regarding its value and role began to emerge. And that takes us to our next chapter of the SU-122-54's story. The West finally became aware of the SU-122-54 in September of 1967, when the Soviet military launched one of the largest exercises in Soviet military history, Exercise Dnieper. Most observers and military analysts at the time focused both on the size of the exercise as well as the large-scale use of airborne forces. The Soviet army dropped 2 complete airborne divisions with all their equipment in support of a front-level offensive during the exercise. Previously unseen by the West, the new Soviet SU-122-54 at the time went almost unnoticed. The next chapter in the SU-122-54 story finds us in August 1968 for Operation Danube, the Soviet and Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia. This was a pivotal event for the Cold War-era Soviet army. The large-scale mobilization and deployment of Soviet and Warsaw Pact forces represented a sort of dress rehearsal for World War III. Along with Soviet forces from the Group of Soviet Forces Germany, Northern Group of Forces Poland, and Southern Group of Forces Hungary, Soviet forces from the Carpathian, Belarusian, Baltic, and Odessa military districts mobilized and moved west into eastern Czechoslovakia and into Poland. About 20 divisions were mobilized, including some 11 of those with low peacetime manning and equipment levels. At least 5 armies were apparently mobilized. 3 of them, and about 10 of the mobilized divisions, were used against Czechoslovakia. At least 125,000 Soviet reservists and 20,000 trucks in all. The SU-122-54s were involved throughout the invasion, and their use seemed to be kept out of the spotlight as much as possible. For example, they were not deployed in Prague. SU-122-54s were actually photographed in 10 different Czechoslovakian cities during Operation Danube, and a few of these locations were notable. On August 21, 1968, Soviet forces moved through Poland and crossed the city of Saskatchewan, located on the border between Czechoslovakia and Poland, on the Czech side of the Friendship Bridge. A few photographs were taken of the Soviet forces as they crossed the bridge to enter Czechoslovakia, including one of an SU-122-54 at the moment it entered Czech territory. In Příbram, southwest of Prague, only about 65 miles from the West German border, one of the SU-122-54s was photographed at a bus station. In Zvolin, a man suddenly laid on the street in protest of the invasion, directly in the path of an advancing SU-122-54, hoping to stop the vehicle and the column of vehicles following close behind. Unfortunately, it continued to move forward and crushed him. It killed him in front of a bus full of witnesses, and as of today, this is our only known reference that ties the SU-122-54 to directly causing a casualty. At the conclusion of Operation Danube, the majority of Soviet forces from the Western Military District returned to the Soviet Union, while certain Soviet units remained to form the new Central Group of Forces based in Czechoslovakia. All the SU-122-54s were moved back to Soviet territory. After Operation Danube, the SU-122-54s were never seen again. Well, not in their Soviet assault gun and tank destroyer form. In the 1970s, a Soviet TV series called The Ruins of Fire, set during World War II, included a battle scene between Soviet and German forces. The Germans were actually supported by a few SU-122-54s, put up in costume as German assault guns from World War II. In 1977, a new armored recovery vehicle was spotted in Moscow supporting the annual November parade in the Red Square. The U.S. Army Field Manual FM 100-2-3 included a photo of this vehicle along with the incorrect designation T-62T. It was actually a heavily modified SU-122-54 with the main gun removed. It was used as a tug or recovery vehicle in case any of the parade vehicles broke down. It was also seen during Red Square parades in 1985 and 1995. Seen as different variants since that first appearance in the Red Square, these modified vehicles have served in Afghanistan, with the United Nations Interim Force and Lebanon forces, and currently in the Ukraine. Another interesting one of the SU-122 variants was photographed in Chernobyl after the disaster cleanup effort. You can see here how it was modified with the addition of an exterior layer of lead plates. This was to help protect the crew from radiation during cleanup operations. The SU-122-54 assault gun and tank destroyer was developed, put into production, fielded, and retired from Soviet armed service almost unnoticed by the US and NATO. The scarce information that was known was so highly classified that the troops in the field never received it. While the number of vehicle that did roll off the production line was small, it was much more the result of Soviet process and planning that it was kept so secret. With very few exceptions, the SU-122-54 was successfully kept secret at a time in history when learning military secrets was the overwhelming priority. This is made even more significant by the vehicle's participation in the Soviet Army's highest priority events at the time. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to specially thank Mr. Warford for the material and to interlinked from the assistants. Historical references for this video are as follows. I really like the Soviet armored vehicles from history, especially these casemate designs. I'd really like to see the SU-122-54 myself, and of course, traveling out to Kubinka seeing Patriot Park is a must someday. There are some more Soviet tanks and tank destroyers planned on the roster. Let me know what you thought and what you'd like to see more of down in the comments below. Toss a like to your YouTuber, viewer of plenty, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.